It's captured in a Filipino word called hanap buhay. And by hanap buhay, I don't mean livelihood or earning money. Hanap buhay is all about living life in its fullness, developing your talents to the full, and putting them in the service of mankind. A successful business, to my mind, would be an enterprise that has contributed in a positive way to the well-being of all stakeholders. So that goes beyond shareholder value. So you're talking about employees, you're talking about customers, you're talking about creditors, you're talking about society in general, you're talking about environment. So we're really talking all stakeholders, the whole human being and the environment in which we live. A successful business leader is one who is able to influence, change in the direction of business being in the service of man. It's difficult. It's very challenging. It requires one not just to be actively engaged, but it requires a very high degree of self-awareness of what drives you to make certain decisions, and also a huge amount of courage. Good business leaders need to be braveheart. Business leaders and business organizations are two things to me. The first one is catalysts for change. The second one is formators of values. If you will review how values have changed in the whole society, in families, in communities, in the country, in the world in general, these are driven by business practices, driven by advertising and promotions purposes. Well, there's one movement or practice. It's called Gawad Kalinga. And many enterprises and business organizations have actually contributed to this movement. I find it to be a very interesting case, not just for one-time study, but for continuing study, because it's an evolving movement. It began with a dream to provide homes for those who have no homes, yeah, or for those who are informal dwellers. And so in doing this, the first thing that companies who are into CSR or corporate social responsibility did was to contribute funds. But they were encouraged not just to contribute funds, but for their employees to contribute their time as well to help build these homes. And the recipients or the beneficiaries were also encouraged to put in what we call sweat equity. And then this moved on towards community development and community organizing, into which not just the beneficiaries again, and not just the people in Gawad Kalinga, but also the sponsors were encouraged to be actively engaged. So it became an entire community's concern, or the entire business organization's concern, to be actively engaged and have a stake in the success of that particular organization. And then they got into livelihood, they got into education, then they got into, how do you call this now, values formation. No? So it's an integrated movement which encourages the business organization to actually be involved in a real CSR activity that goes beyond just contributing funds. The easiest for an organization that has excess funds is to contribute funds. Besides, you get a tax credit for it. So, one can do good things for different reasons. One can do good things or have good practices truly for the common good or for one's own self-promotion, if I would put it that way. Is it important, you ask, if for business leaders and business organizations to have ethical business practices? I don't think so. If by ethical business practices you mean business practices that contribute to the common good, that contribute to society in general. We have very clear and very recent examples of how unmitigated greed, let's use that term, which is commonly bandied about, how unmitigated greed and a single focus on a single bottom line, that being shareholder value, has led to the problems that we have now globally in terms of the economic recession. Yeah. So while we might be individuals making decisions for our individual selves, the impact is really not just on our lives, but on the lives of others. So it's very important for me. As a matter of fact, not only very important, it is critical and it is mandated for every business leader and every business organization to consider the impact of every business decision and or practice on all stakeholders. But we have to also accept that I speak from the perspective of someone who believes in that. There may be those who do not believe in considering other stakeholders. So that's where my answer is coming from. One cannot have what I call tunnel vision and think only of a single bottom line. I think that is the one evil practice that must be avoided by a business organization and a business leader who would like to contribute to the common good. Focus on maximizing shareholder value. That focus on the single bottom line is already Jurassic. It was never right, even. One must be open to all of these technological changes to begin with. One has no choice about them. They will happen whether one agrees with it or not. So the thing for one to do, I believe, is to observe, to analyze, to examine its impact, again, on the individual, on the organization, on all stakeholders. To take what will help move the business forward towards making a larger contribution to the common good, and to discard or not to use what will not contribute to the vision or to that objective. So it's the same for individuals as it is for organizations. First, employees, the workforce, or all of us who work here, we consider ourselves what we call kabalikat. Comrades in arms, I guess. Comrades in the effort to enjoy life in its fullness, to be able to put all our time, our talents, and our resources into this enterprise to be able to contribute to the common good. So all of us who work here are magkabalika, are comrades in that effort. That effort cannot be done by me alone. It cannot be done by management alone. It cannot be done by labor alone. It can only be done by all of us working together and all of us collaborating with our suppliers, with our customers, all our other stakeholders. You ask if I believe that work is for man. Yes. I believe that work is a vocation. I believe that work is a vehicle for our growing in God's image and likeness, for our experiencing life in its fullness, for our experiencing being part of a community where we have mutually nurturing relationships. So yes, I believe work is for man, and no, I strongly object to the paradigm that man is for work, because that would make man a simple cog in production, like a machine, and man is not a machine. Man is a human being. So that's what it's all about. Whether you're talking about work that's paid for, or work that is volunteer work, or whether you're talking about work in business, or work in family, as a wife, as a husband, or as a child. All of these, I believe, are vehicles for us to be able to use our talents and skills, to be able to develop them to the max, and to be able to make a positive contribution both to all the people that we live with or interact with, as well as to the society in which we live. I'll talk about good business practices. There's only one for a business leader, and that is to be what might be called contemplative in action. What exactly do I mean? That requires being aware, A, of what drives you, or what is driving you towards a particular decision. 2, being aware of the impact of each option on the stakeholders. So, for me, that would be the most important, to observe, to analyze, to be both self-aware and aware of the environment in which we are living, in which we are in business, in which we are practicing our craft, our craft of being business leaders. So it's very important to be aware. So there's mastery of self, mastery of your organization, and mastery of your environment. That to be a business leader is a vocation. One does not exactly choose to be one. One becomes one through the people, the events, and the situations in one's life. How does one prepare to become one, assuming that is one's vocation? Simply by being constantly aware, constantly self-aware. My assumption is that one's values are clear to one. However, this is something that one needs to continue to distill as one goes through life, because values change. Everything changes, yeah? Values change. And if one does not maintain a contemplative attitude, if one does not constantly examine oneself and one's motivations, then one's values could change in directions one does not wish. And one might wake up one day to find that you're a person you do not like, you know. And so I think it's very important for everyone, regardless of whether one is to be a business leader or not, to develop self-awareness and other awareness. The impact of decisions one makes, not just on oneself, but on the other, or on the others, on society.
Couple of birds kissing on the corner, couldn't help but remind me of you.